Hey Pilgrims, Pastor Craig, Horton Congregational Church. I need somebody to help us out this morning with our video. So I've called Abe up here. Come on, Abe. Come on. Come on. Here you go. Come here. Here he comes. Here he comes. Come on, Abe. Come on in here. So Abe is one of my oxen. He's the only oxen I've got left. I used to have a team of Abe and George, and then after that I had a couple of more, but Abe here is a registered Ayrshire steer, and he's not registered. He comes from registered stock. And you see his yoke sitting here in front of this, and I want him to help me tell the story of Elisha. Elisha is found in 1 Kings 19, chapter 19, the story of his calling anyway, and then for chapters after that, the story of him. Elijah was called by God to go find Elisha and to ordain him, if you will, as a prophet. And we find that story, like I say, in 1 Kings 19. Well, a team of oxen, and Abe used to have that partner George, and like I said, this is our yoke in front of him. George died a few years ago, so Abe is all by himself here. But when Elijah found Elisha, he was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen, and he was plowing on the 12th yoke, because he had the 12th team that he was directing. That means there were 11 teams in front of the ones that he was guiding. That really tells us a couple different things about Elisha, and that is, first of all, he's awful wealthy in order to have 12 teams. The second thing is he was in a position of leadership for him to be driving the 12th team. So we know that from that story. That's what happened with that. So anyhow, he probably didn't have Ayrshires. Ayrshires are a dairy breed. He probably had something else. Ayrshires are known for these horns. That's kind of why I wanted this breed as my first team. He's about 18 years old, by the way. Anyway, so Elisha had 12 yoke of oxen. He was plowing with the 12th team. And Elijah came along and threw his cloak over him as a way of indicating to him that he had special plans for him, that he intended to anoint him as a prophet. And Elisha ran after him and said, "What are you doing?" Elijah said, "What have I done to you?" And Elisha understood that it meant something special that God had planned for him. And he said, "Well, let me go back and kiss my mother and father goodbye and take care of things." And Elijah said, "Go do what you have to do." Elisha went back, and not only did he tell his loved ones goodbye, we surmise, that's not in the actual story, but this point is in the story. And he took those 12 yoke of oxen, those 24 oxen, and he butchered them all. He burned up all of the yokes and the plowing equipment, and he distributed the money, or the meat from the oxen amongst the folks of the area. The point is, he knew he was called to something different from what he had been doing, even though he was wealthy and even though he was in that position of leadership. It reminds us a little bit of the story that we find in Matthew 4 when Jesus called the first disciples. You know, he was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and he saw Peter and Andrew, who were casting nets into the sea. They were fishing using nets. And he called them, and they immediately left their nets and followed him. That's where we get that song that you probably learned in Sunday school. I know I did. It goes, "I will make you fishers of men, fishers of men, fishers of men." Because he said, quit fishing for fish, and I'll show you how to fish for people. Then he walked down the beach a little bit and found James and John, also the sons of Zebedee, and he called them. They were in their boats preparing their nets to start fishing. And he called them, and they immediately left their nets and followed Christ. So the lesson for us this morning, whether we talk about Elisha, whether we talk about Peter and Andrew, or whether we talk about James and John, is when Christ calls us, we need to leave behind that life that we had before. It doesn't necessarily mean we need to leave our families, need to leave our jobs, because there are plenty of ministry opportunities in those circumstances, but it does mean we need to leave behind that life of sin, that life of debauchery, that life of chasing after material things, that life of going for what this world offers instead of for what Christ offers. You know, the verse I'm reminded of, and I printed this off before I came out here to the pasture, so I wanted to make sure I quoted it to you right. It comes from Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." See, when we turn away from that yoke of sin and death, that this world invites us to, and go to a yoke that Jesus Christ offers. It's easy and it's light. You know, I'm thought of the song that we often sing in church. It goes like this. Jesus calls us o'er the tumult of our life's wild restless sea. Day by day his sweet voice soundeth, saying, Christian, follow me. My prayer for you today is that you'll turn away from that life of sin and death and turn to a life that Christ offers us, a life where our yoke is easy and the burden is light, because we are no longer weighed down by that life of sin that leads to death, but we are promised that life eternal that leads to a glorious, wonderful reunion in the sky when we're called home to be with Christ forever. Amen.